at least current scholarship. But it's just this idea of we have this massive information and evidence that speaks to some sort of deification of Naram Sin. The most reasonable, quote unquote, explanation would be to say that he was. But of course, nobody would think that because we're not crazy, right? We would say that, oh, well, there's another reason that better explains it. So I don't know if that in any way speaks to the question, Tom, but gave it my best shot.
Give me your best shot. Fire away. I do have a question from chat. He's not able to come up and talk at the moment. So his question was, he would like for both of you to speak a bit on the authorship of Isaiah and why we think there are multiple authors.
What's this guy's name?
It is from Spartan Theology.
Oh, I wonder if Spartan Theology has been reading SJ's blog recently.
He's a good guy. I think he's been involved in this. Kipp, I'm going to let you field it because you're the one that's been engaging. You're welcome.
Okay. The authorship of Isaiah. The scholarly consensus, the standard theory right now, and as far as I know, this is even less controversial among evangelical scholars than things like the authorship and dating of the Book of Daniel. As far as I know, the vast majority of scholars accept that Isaiah is a composite work, and the common divisions within the text. I mean, basically, what we're talking about is the first part, which comprises chapters 1 through 39, were written at some point in the 8th, 7th century, and consist mostly of like genuine material that was written by Isaiah ben Amoz, who was, as far as we know, maybe a court prophet or a priest in the temple in Jerusalem during the reigns of Uzziah, Hezekiah, Ahaz. I think, was there another king there, Josh? That
I can't remember off the top of my head.
So 8th, 7th century, prophet Isaiah prophesied about the Assyrian invasion of Israel and of Jerusalem, and so the first 39 chapters of the book of Isaiah is generally attributed to this time period, to the 8th, 7th century BCE. And then there is an obvious shift in the literary style and in the content of the prophecies, which have suggested to scholars for quite a long time now that this is different material. This is not something that that was written by the same guy in the 7th, 8th century. And this material appears in chapters 40 through 54, I think, and is generally called Deutero, or Second Isaiah, and set sometime during the exilic period, after the destruction of Jerusalem, but before the return of the remnant to Jerusalem. And like I said, there's literary clues, there's syntactical clues, there's temporal clues within this part of the book itself that suggests that we're dealing with an anonymous collection of poems and oracles from this time period. And then in chapters 55 through 60.
Hey, Doctor. Actually, I had a question for both you and
Sorry.
Dr. Like, oops, sorry.
I just unplugged my microphone.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say I don't think he was finished.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Apologies.
So the third section, which is identified as Trito Isaiah or Third Isaiah, is set in the return period after the exile. Once all the once the remnant of Jews has returned to Jerusalem, another anonymous prophet or writer or poet is delivering these oracles that eventually get written down. And the way that scholars tend to see the whole book is very, very similar to how they see other composite books like the 12 minor prophets in the Hebrew Bible. They're separated as individual books in our English Bibles, but in the Hebrew Bible, traditionally... Not again. Sorry, it happened again.
I think we can still hear you.
Bible. Oh, okay. In the Hebrew Bible, this is one book, and it's just called the 12 Prophets or the 12, and it's a compilation. You know, there are individual short prophecies by separate authors that were collected together over a longer period of time in an individual scroll, or the Megillot, which is the books of Esther and Song of Songs and Ruth and Ecclesiastes. I think these short little books were also collected together in an individual scroll, even though they were obviously understood by everybody as separate works. Well, you have a situation very similar to that with the book of Isaiah, where attached to Isaiah's original prophecies, you have these other texts. I think from the very beginning, it was never thought that this was stuff that Isaiah said, that scribes originally just kind of put this stuff together thematically, with the expectation and the understanding that these are separate individual works. And we actually have some manuscript evidence which illustrates this too from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Even though the break doesn't happen at chapter 39 in the Great Isaiah Scroll, which might be the most famous of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's a completely intact copy of Isaiah. There's a very clear break that divides the two halves of the scroll at the end of chapter 33, just at the beginning of chapter 34. And then in chapters 35 through 39, which is a section like an historical section, there's marginal notations which set that off from the rest of the text. And then you have other manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's another copy of Isaiah from Qumran where you see similar divisions. Actually, there's a division between chapter 39 and chapter 40, where there's like a complete line separation that clearly divides these things. So we have some sense that, you know, for a very long period of time, these things were just collected together, even though they were written by separate individuals. And over time, because Isaiah's was the only name that was at the beginning of the whole collection, the entire collection eventually ended up getting attributed to him. I'm sorry, that was a very, very long answer, but...
No, thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So,
yeah, I actually I had no idea about that whole, like, the minor prophets being like one thing or whatever. That's really interesting.
Oh, so. Yeah, like this is something that most unless you're Jewish, you wouldn't know this, or unless you know have spent some time looking at Hebrew text, you wouldn't know this. And this too, like this is something that we see within our oldest manuscripts, within the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are several fragments from minor prophet scrolls, and we can see very clearly that it was a single scroll where all the 12 prophets were collected together in one document. So yeah, it's that's how it works.
Yeah, and then to end it off, you probably would have appreciated my comment before that. I said before you guys started, I said, why doesn't Dr. Kipp just admit SJ is an amazing scholar and she has debunked his ideas on the Dead Sea Scrolls? But yeah, totally kidding. I just think it's funny, that whole nonsense. But I really appreciate all the stuff you do. I've already learned a ton from you. I've only been paying attention for a little while, so.
I appreciate that. I noticed this morning that she had commented in her blog that she's read all the literature she has in her university library about Isaiah, and is drawing all her information from there. So
I mean, I guess that's quite possible. She went to like the business school library or whatever. Maybe they don't have anything.
Yeah, maybe not. I gotta step away for just a second if Josh wants to maybe field a couple of questions. Excuse me.
I'd like to share my thoughts on the authorship of Isaiah, if you don't mind.
Well, why don't you wait for Dr. Kipp to come back so we can hear what you have to say?
Yeah, and really, Nephilim, I mean, I'm not trying to blackball you or anything, but this was more to hear from the experts on the issue.
Oh, so you guys are the experts?
No, we're just mods. Those two are.
Okay.
But I did have a question, Dr. Josh, since nobody's.
Yeah, sure.
So I often hear the Mosaic Law being compared to the Code of Hammurabi, but weren't there actually earlier codes that predated the Hammurabi Code that kind of had the same framework that the Hammurabi Code seemed to put forth?
Yeah, so there are a lot of law collections that we see from the ancient Near East. So you've got from the 3rd millennium the laws of Ornamu, which are certainly not as complete as the 282 preserved laws in Hammurabi, which is one of the reasons that Hammurabi is such a go-to. You've got the laws of Lipit Ishtar, you've got Middle Assyrian laws. There are lots of the laws of Eshnuna. So Martha Roth has a phenomenal little book. I think it was put together in the 90s, and there's a second edition of it, I believe, in the early 2000s, called The Law Collections of Asia Minor. And she has them all both in their original transliteration, so Sumerian or Akkadian transliteration, and the Hittite laws are in there as well, and then English, with little comments here and there. But it's a phenomenal little collection. It's in the Society of Biblical Literature series. But yeah, I mean, the laws of Hammurabi come up so frequently. One, because of their close relationship, which is debated to what extent that relationship is close between what we see in places like the Covenant Code in Exodus 21, for example, and what we see in Hammurabi. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There are definitely those that predate the laws of Hammurabi, going back to the end of the 3rd millennium.
Yeah, I was just kind of, well, not the fanboy, but because of your work, I, had did some diving into more about the Hammurabi Code, and was actually kind of surprised to find out, the extent and in-depthness that we have in the Hammurabi Code. And I thought that was the earliest that we had on laws, but I thought it's pretty cool that, I mean, even to me, it doesn't matter if the framework was borrowed or even some of the laws or things. Just such an ancient society having such a detailed and oftentimes very humane way of treating at least their society, not those outside of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's this idea, and I talk about it probably in a little more detail in that Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery book, but this sort of sharp contrast, this line of demarcation that people have set up between what we see in the Hebrew Bible and what we see in other ancient Near Eastern law collections, and there's no question that there's not like uniformity between them. It's not like it's not like it's a carbon copy or something like that. But there's people like Raymond Westbrook have argued things like there's a legal tradition that stands behind these law collections. There's like a way of thinking about legality and jurisprudence. And again, like law is not my area of specialization. Bruce Wells is, probably currently one of the best to read on this sort of thing. But yeah, there's definitely a mindset, an ancient Near Eastern mindset, and you can see how that plays out in the specific, the specific individual law collections and how they deal with similar issues. There's often, often a close to one-to-one correspondence, but even if there's not, there's a certain way of dealing with it that's uniform between them, the way they think about dealing with these particular issues. So
was it it's a stele that we have, right? It's was
yeah,
it
that word is pronounced so many different ways.
well, I was gonna say I've heard it called stele,
Yeah,
stele, yeah,
Stele.
it's
Stella, yeah.
yeah, it's well, I'm glad I picked one that was half right.
Yeah, we all know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So is it attributed to King Hammurabi or
Oh yeah, definitely written.
okay.
I think close to his. It was close to 1750. So, yeah, I mean, 25, 30 years into his reign. I'm trying to pull back his actual dates. Might not have been quite that late, maybe 20 years. Anyway, but yeah, it wasn't the only. We don't think it was the only one. Certainly, it wasn't the only one that was in existence. This one was taken in the 12th century, I think, to Susa as war plunder, along with I think the Victory Stele of Naram Sin as well. But it was set up in Susa as like a trophy, and they scratched out, I want to say 30 laws. I can't remember exactly. So you have this sort of spot that was cleared away for another inscription of the Elamite king to go on, but never actually got added. Yeah, but it's currently the one that we have is in the Louvre, the really famous one.
Sweet, appreciate it. I think
Yeah,
Frey's got a question.
I
Or
I
yeah, Nirvana had one. So
I actually have a question.
Oh, I have a question. I just didn't want to interrupt, but
All
Nirvana,
right.
go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
okay, I got you. Mine is basically when I was a Christian up until I think about like 2 years ago. One of the more interesting things for me was talking about biblical prophecy. And I had a question in the realms of the people. A lot of people will claim the Bible predicted Alexander the Great, like in Daniel 8:5-8 and 21-22, where it states the king of Greece will conquer the Persians. I just didn't know what you guys had to say on like the historicity of like certain claims in the Bible and things like that.
Dr. Kipp, I talked for a long time on the last one. If you want to, I can take it, whatever you want to do.
No, no, that's cool. So is your question with regards to the dating of Daniel specifically?
I guess so. Is there really? I guess it would kind of be more of a general question of like, is there anything that like in the Bible that isn't just like added through revision that like looks to be a prophecy?
Well, I mean, we have a number of preserved actual prophecies within the Bible. I mean, offhand, I'm thinking about some of Ezekiel's prophecies, his prophecy to Tyre. We're confident of the originality of that in large part because it wasn't fulfilled, and he ended up having to redress it later on. But Jeremiah's prophecy of 70 weeks for the exile is viewed as an original Jeremiah utterance. Of course, I think it's in my own understanding of what he's talking about there has less to do with predicting a precise date for the return from exile and has more about communicating to the people who are living in Babylon that you are going to be there for a long time. So and honestly, I think this is in large part how a lot of prophecy within the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament works. When you look at things like we were just talking about Isaiah. When you look at the things that some of the oldest of the Hebrew prophets would predict, guys like Amos or Hosea or even Isaiah. Isaiah delivered messages from Yahweh to the kings of Israel. And when you read that material, most of it has to do with giving strongly worded advice about policy. Of course, policy was also wrapped up in religion in ancient Israel. So, we tend to pick up on the role that Yahweh plays in the prophecies that the prophets are delivering, and quite often what's missed is the I guess the political or the social or even the economic elements of these things. And then over time, because in antiquity, writing generally and prophecy generally was viewed as being imbued with power, like spiritual power, almost like magic. These things were collected and studied, and in many respects reinterpreted in later periods to mean different things. I'll go back to Jeremiah. Jeremiah talks about a new covenant, one that's not going to be written on stone, but written on the heart. And this is something that gets picked up centuries later by the Apostle Paul, and then applied to the new Christian movement. So it I feel like I'm rambling a bit here, but when I've taught about prophecy, when I've taught about prophetic text, I've told my students that the best way to think about it in situ, like in the situation, in the context of its deliverance, is as much social commentary and royal critique as it is about predicting the future. The whole idea that the prophets predicted the future is something that developed over time, and in large part was a result of the success of some of the individual prophets. I mean, Isaiah was right about what was going to happen to Jerusalem when the Assyrians um, were bearing down upon them, and Jeremiah was right in a manner of speaking about the return of the exiles to Jerusalem, even though, like I said, I don't necessarily think that was the point. But because of the success of some of these guys, then the other things that they said, which might not have had anything to do with the distant future, started to become like coded messages. And you read in the literature of Second Temple Jews, mostly within the Dead Sea Scrolls, but in other places too, like in the books of Enoch or Jubilees, you can see that this is essentially what happens to the prophetic literature generally. Is it just kind of becomes like a collection of coded messages about what people happen to be going through in the moment, in the time, at that day.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that answers my question. I actually got into a discussion with somebody a while back about Antiochus, specifically in
Antiochus.
Or Antiochus. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm awful about pronouncing things.
No, that's fine. It's most people are.
I think that's one of the key things about the book of Daniel is, there's this idea that, or this problem with Daniel, which is part of, it's an apocalyptic text.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's that genre, apocalyptic texts often have a certain amount of ambiguity, right? Shadowiness. So if you read through Daniel 11, for example, if you know the history, of the time of leading up to Antiochus, the Fourth Epiphanes, you very quickly recognize, oh, this is post the breakup of Alexander's kingdom, and leading down up to Antiochus the Fourth. And I mean, you can see it in some detail, but because it's, generally speaking, it's not specific, with names. There are a couple places in chapter 11 that I think it slips up, and tips his hand more than he maybe wanted to, but it allows for this, the king of the north, the king of the south. Well, who is that? And it allows this sort of theological approach to the text, where we can say this sort of near and far fulfillment. Okay, so the near fulfillment was Antiochus, but the distant fulfillment is yet to come, right? And because there's not this great specificity, at least it's easy to overlook if you don't know the actual history of the period. You can then apply it broadly, and this is what has been done throughout history, not just modern history. But I think, as Dr. Kipp was saying, and it's so important to recognize, is that the role of, the role of the diviner, the role of the prophet, the role of the person that stood as, an intermediary between the divine realm and the human realm, and how they were able to sort of, in many ways, monopolize this role of letting the king, for example, know what the gods are actually saying. So in Mesopotamia, you see this all over the place, right? King's getting ready to go to battle. It's a bad time to be a goat, right? Because they kill goats and look at the liver. And they look at the liver and say, all right, well, there's a little deformity here, a little mark there. And that tells us that army is going to be successful, or there's going to be a failure or whatever. So it's a bad time to be a goat. But the point is these prophecies, these prophets, these intermediaries, we're not talking about some distant future event that they're speaking of. A great example of this, and it's the one that John Collins always gives, I think it's perfect, so I'm going to use it, is Micaiah ben Imlah in 1 Kings 22. And I won't go into the whole story, but I mean, like, essentially you got all these professional prophets, and these two kings of Israel and Judah are getting ready to go, and they're thinking about going to war. And they say, all right, bring the prophets in. And all the prophets are dancing around, and oh yeah, you're gonna go up and you're gonna win. And one of them makes like an iron yoke or something. Here's what you're gonna do to the other king. You're gonna put him in this yoke. And you can sort of picture the kings sort of sitting there with their chins in their hands, going, all right, this is expected. Of course, the professional prophets are gonna tell us what we want to hear. I want somebody that's gonna shoot straight with me. So he actually says, something like, isn't there somebody that won't just be a yes man? Right. And so they bring this guy, Micaiah, the son of Imlah. And when he comes, he first gives a positive message. And the king looks at him and says, wait a second. You never give me positive messages. And so then he foretells their doom. Right. And this is that famous passage about sending out the lying spirit, God sending out the lying spirit. But the point is that this isn't about some distant time, centuries in the future. It's not about 2,000 years from then. This is about a battle they're getting ready to go into. And this is how prophecy functioned. Again, apocalyptic literature develops that. So it's obviously not quite that cut and dry. But this is the general nature of how prophets worked in early Israel.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
I think Craig. Sorry, go ahead, Narada.
No, I was just gonna say that was extremely interesting. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Of course.
So Craig's got a question, and then I've got one from chat from TJump. So go ahead, Craig.
Yeah. So mine is pretty simple, but especially with Dr. Josh, in your book you go through a lot of the contradictions in the Bible. And that there are still Christians that just believe there are no contradictions in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And even for example, I think my dad, because I was listening to the audiobook, and you were in the book was discussing in Noah, and how in the one section it says takes 2 of every animal, and then on one it was 7 pairs. Yeah. And my dad was like, well, that's really stupid because 2 is part of 7, so that's not a contradiction.
Right.
And so I only imagine you guys encounter that a lot. And so what would you say is the best approach to when talking with someone like that? And obviously you can't reach everybody, or but
yeah, this is tough. And Dr. Kipp, I'll be quick and you can jump in. Part of the difficulty, I think, with this is that there's always a possibility, right? And if anybody out there, and Craig, I think you were there, who heard my talk at the Better Conference, which, by the way, is still on in person in May. I see Oz in the chat, so get your reservations now. But in that,
you might want to read his comment first, Dr. Josh.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe I'd hold that in abeyance. Belay that. No, I'm kidding. Don't belay that. But I forgot what I was saying. Oh, part
Contradiction.
of the problem is that so often in these discussions, as you say, Correa, that there's always a well, isn't it possible that, right? So the example that I always like to give comes from Genesis 2. So in Genesis 1, you have the
I was
animals.
going there.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'll save it.
No. You do it, man. But I'm impressed.
Well, so in Genesis 1, the animals are created, and then on the sixth day, and then humanity is created after them, and the humanity is created together. In Genesis 2, man is created, and then only after that, for a very specific purpose, are all the animals created. And then only after that purpose sort of falls flat, and nothing is, the purpose isn't fulfilled or whatever, they didn't find a helper for the man, then is the woman created. Well, this is like these two things are incompatible. Now, I'm going to give the proposed, the thing that's proposed by Christian apologists or some evangelical scholars, and I will let Kipp, because Kipp's done a lot of work on this, so he can go into it if he likes. But some of the responses to that sort of thing are, well, when it says God created all the animals and sent them to Adam, okay, couldn't that be like all the animals of the garden? Couldn't it be that he created all the animals in Genesis 1, but then there was this like special creation of animals in the garden? Well, I mean, is that possible? I guess, right? But is that reasonable? And that was sort of my point in the presentation, is trying to prove these things, I think, can often be futile. If so, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, right? So if you're trying to convince somebody there's a contradiction here, all they need is a possibility, right? To them, it's like a deductive argument. As long as I can find a possible situation. Are you proud of me, Eddie, that I brought philosophy into this? A possible situation that disproves one of the premises, and it doesn't have to actually disprove it. It's just possible, and it doesn't hold anyway.
But
My suggestion is to say, okay, I'm going to grant the possibility. I would like you to defend how that's the most reasonable conclusion. But sorry, go ahead, Dr. Kipp.
yeah, I like that. I was gonna say though, I think it's telling that so much of the language from Christian apologists is on solving Bible conflict, right? The solution to these difficult passages. I think that tells you everything you need to know about what's going on with the text. The fact that somebody believes in the first place that there has to be a quote unquote solution, it's already a clue as to what the agenda is behind what's going on. And sometimes too, you can thinking about the Genesis 1 and the Genesis 2 clear contradiction. Something that I've dealt with quite directly is what sounds like a very sophisticated argument. You might hear some Christian apologists say, well, in Hebrew, there is no form for what's called the pluperfect verb. This is a fancy way of saying like a completed action in the distant past. So another solution to this contradiction could be that when it says God made the animals, I think it's Genesis chapter 2 verses 17. You could translate that as God had already made the animals in the distant past. and now only just now brought them to the man to see what would name them. And this is where like people have to be really careful, and people have to be really, really tuned in to what the claim is here. Because while it's true, while that's true, that there is no formal like there's no formal version. There's no conjugation of the verb in Hebrew that indicates a completed action in the distant past.
Just so
It's
everybody knows,
different.
Kip, what he's saying is, in case anybody isn't following what Blue Perfect means, um, you know, I ate, or I sat down at the table. I had gone to the store to get milk, so I took out the milk and poured it into the glass, so that I had gone to the store, as opposed to saying I sat down at the table, I went to the store, I poured the glass of milk. You would say I sat down at the table, now I had gone to the store to get milk, so I then poured the glass of milk. That's what they're saying is happening in Genesis 2. Now God had created the animals, and then he brought them to the man. Sorry, Kip, just want to make sure that was clear.
No, that's good. It's good. You're there to help clarify. So, but this is, and I think the reason this gets brought up is because in Greek, there is like a specific conjugation of the verb that you use in order to indicate something in the distant past. The problem is that as soon as you employ some of these constructions as they're suggested by apologists, then they tend to break down the natural progression of the text. There's also other rules and conventions within the original language that we use when we read these texts. So in this particular passage in Genesis chapter 2, the fact that this is part of a narrative sequence and the verbs appear in a very specific form all the way throughout suggests to the reader who's reading the original language these are consecutive action. You can't just insert completed action here because the language, even though it might allow that, technically speaking, it's not the natural way to read it. And I've often said to people, if this is what the Hebrew author had actually intended to communicate to us, that God had created the animals in the distant past, and then at a later point in time brought them to the man. There were things he could do within the language to show that, and the fact that he didn't is a very, very obvious indication that that you can't inflate this. You can't fit this passage in with what's going on in Genesis.
Yeah, if I could give like a modern example, so like if I said, Johnny was sitting at the table and Johnny didn't have a lot to do, he was very bored, and so he decided to go outside and play. You could say, oh, well, Johnny had a hole that was drilled in him, right? Johnny was bored.
Yeah.
And so he had this hole drilled into him, because the word bored can mean that, like a hole was bored into him. But you'd have to have some reason to expect that. Now, if you have somebody like Eminem, right, who's rapping and saying something like,
I can do that. Nirvana.
yeah, I know you can, Eddie. But like very specifically,
No,
where
that wasn't me. That was God.
No. But where he says, damn it, Eddie, you made me lose it. Oh, sorry. Exercising these demons right? These motherfuckers are doing jumping jacks now. Now, when you hear that, you might think, "Oh man, he made a mistake." You know, exercising. It's exorcising. But so you wouldn't though make that argument with Eminem because throughout all of his lyrics, he has these really subtle, very clever word plays. So it would be perfectly reasonable to say, no, that was intentional. In fact, it would be unreasonable to say that it was a mistake. But so you can make the case, but you have to make the case. You can't just say, "Oh, well, bored here means that he had a hole in him," and since that's possible, that must be what it means. No, you have to make the case literarily and grammatically and syntactically to say, no, that's what it means here.
So take that, literalist and inerrantist.
I do. Can I read one thing?
Absolutely.
Because Dr. Kipp, I think this sort of sums up what you were saying earlier about where it's sort of bringing it full circle, where this begins, and it tells you all you need to know. I have a really good friend I went to seminary with. I went and got his PhD down in Dallas, and he wrote a book on the dating of the Book of Daniel. And I quote him in my chapter on the dating of Daniel in the Atheist Handbook. And here's what he writes. Most importantly, Daniel was a prophet who wrote infallibly under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, whereas extra biblical sources for the life of Cyrus are ordinary human writings. Since God was speaking through Daniel as he wrote, the book of Daniel is not to be viewed as an account of uncertain trustworthiness, whose veracity is to be judged by other data, but rather must be the standard by which all other accounts are measured. When you start there, there's really nowhere else to go.
That's from his dissertation, right?
Yeah.
And he published it too?
He self-published it in 2014.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for that question, Craig. We got a couple of questions from the chat. TJump has a... Oh, never mind. There we go. You do you, Big Daddy.
Yeah, so my question is what is your position on which biblical patriarchs and matriarchs existed versus didn't exist in the Old Testament, and how do you differentiate between the two?
You want to go first?
I would say, so we're talking about the I assume when you're asking about patriarchs, you're talking about the figures from the book of Genesis.
Oh, I just mean like any. So Adam, Cain, Abel, Eve, Abraham, Isaac, Moses.
Yeah. All right. So I mean, it's I would say that there's no there's no reason to think that any figure from the biblical narrative in Genesis was an historical person, like is somebody that actually exists, that the book of Genesis actually preserves a written account of real people in the distant past. It's not something from, as you know, as an historian, it's not something that we have any kind of actual access to. There's no third party verification for any of this stuff. And because we see pretty consistently throughout the text that there's what we would call an etiological, and I'll explain this in a minute. It's an etiological. These are etiological texts. What I mean by that is that these are stories that were written and they were told as a means to explain and to answer questions about life, about where we came from, about why we do the things that we do. Um, so I guess I start from there. I start from the premise that essentially anything outside of the Iron Age, which is, begins at about 1000 BC with the reigns of David and Solomon and Rehoboam, anything outside of that, we just don't have any way to access that and to investigate that historically within the Bible. So we start from the position. I start from the position that this is fulfilling an etiological purpose. These are stories that are told as a means to provide explanation and to provide identity to the people who are writing them down centuries and centuries later. Now, that's not to say that they can't be based on actual figures from the distant past. Just have no way to get there. So I don't know. Maybe that's a wishy-washy kind of cop-out answer, but
Yeah, I mean,
that's where I am.
I think a lot of this deals with, as far as what scholars would say about this that are, in the relevant fields. It's not a simple question. In other words, there's no one way to come at it. So, for example, archaeology plays a tremendous role
Yep.
in this. So we know a lot about, Israel starting in the 9th century, right? But from around 1200 down to 900, there's just not much, right? So, but we do know quite a bit about the ancient Near East at the time. We know quite a bit about Canaan at the time, and when you start to lose things like the historicity of the Exodus or the conquest accounts, at least as they're presented in the biblical texts, that's very problematic. Moving backwards, David Alon has a great lecture where he talks about the early origins of Israel on the Oriental Institute's website. I think it might be from 2 years ago, but it's well worth watching. And he has this sort of rule of thumb, and it's a good one, and it's one that most of them hold to, and that is the further back you go in biblical chronology, the less reliable it is. And that just works out well. So, somebody like Joel Baden talked about this recently on Myth Vision, did an interview with Derek and was asked this question. And he said, look, nothing in Genesis 1 through 11, given its genre, given the purpose of the, those 11 chapters, that primeval history, these are mythological figures. Starting to get into Abraham, is it Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph? Are these based on maybe based on memories of people that may or may not have been named Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph? Maybe we just, as Dr. Kipp said, we don't have access to that. What? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, there's extra clues in the text here too, like Jacob's name, means one who grabs the heel or a trickster, and this is his character throughout the story. His brother Esau, his name means red, like red man, and it's so like there's these clues that you see kind of within the text too that suggest to you, oh yeah, well this is not just a straightforward history.
Yeah. And the
So,
last thing, so I would say, for me, once we get to David, I tend to, and it's not my area of expertise, but I tend to fall in a similar line with what Joel Baden says about this. He's got an excellent book on David and the history of David, or at least the quite spun story of David. I tend to think along the same lines that he does, that there's a lot of propaganda going on, in the stories of David and Saul, David, and Solomon, and so that probably has some good historical value to it. Not that it happened, exactly as the biblical texts say, but there's a great deal of spin there that tends to lend it, I think, historical credibility. Once you move down into like the divided monarchy, I mean, now you're on much firmer ground, historically speaking.
yeah. I think just to finish up TJump, I think you had a part of your question too was how to distinguish mythical figures from historical figures within the Bible. And well, I mean, Josh just touched on that there. It's all about what we can reliably pull out of the archaeological record or from third-party sources as starting point. But if you're absent any of that kind of source material, it becomes so much more difficult.
And the very last thing that I'll say, and we have to be very careful. I think when we talk about these figures, Gilgamesh, we have very good reason to believe that Gilgamesh was a real king of the city of Uruk in the 3rd millennium. Like we have pretty good evidence to suggest that. I don't think Andrew George would say it's definitive, but I think he thinks that he was a real guy. Does that mean that he was 2/3 divine and had a wild man friend named Enkidu that got tamed by Shamhat, having sex for 6 days and 7 nights? No. I mean, did they go to the cedar forest and kill the protector guardian of the forest Huwawa? No. Did he go to Utanapishtim, to the ends of the earth to learn about the flood? No. So just because he was a historical figure doesn't mean that all of the legends, and mythology that developed around him carry that same weight, because they certainly do not. And I think that needs to be kept in mind in these discussions.
Great, thanks. That's what I answered my question perfectly.
Awesome.
All right, Antangelo, before you answer your question, we have one more in chat that was waiting. And then after Antangelo, we have another one in chat. So Oz wanted to know, people won't quit talking there, so I gotta find it. Dr. Kipp, how impressed are you with S.J. Thompson's explanation of scripture and historical accuracy?
If you could keep the fawning to a minimum, Kipp, that'd be great.
So I was on a live stream for like 2 weeks ago, and I made this point, and it's one that I have some difficulty with, because S.J. Thomason is she's got a terminal degree, she's a PhD. She teaches at a university. She's got academic training of some sort. I mean, it's in business administration, I think, or something of that nature. And I've never, I mean, I've never read anything that she's written within her field. I don't know anything about her. I don't know anything about business administration, and I have no, I have no reservations about that fact. Um, so I have no way to judge her scholarship, and that's, I mean, that's where she's trained. That's really where her scholarly expertise lies. I mean, I have no way to judge that because I've bothered to look at it, but I mean, the stuff that she publishes on her blog and the things that she promotes in her videos, um, is is not well researched, and it to my eye as somebody who works in the field, it I mean, it exemplifies so many of the worst features of what counts for scholarship, and I'll say this, I can't imagine going out of my own field of expertise and my own training to deign to talk to people who are experts in their own field and to tell them basically how to do their work and, you know, uh, to pass judgment on the quality of their research since I don't know anything about it. And I think when I read her stuff and when I see her videos, that's all that I can see now. That's all that I hear is somebody who doesn't know uh, the bare minimum about critical biblical scholarship or ancient history or textual criticism, or to say nothing of the languages or manuscript culture and all these things that scholars use in biblical studies. It's it's very it's very hard for me um to be nice, I guess.
I think you've been
Uh
extremely charitable.
yeah, well, I appreciate that. I do. She
I
didn't
mean, if
think
I,
so the last time I was on her channel, but it it's it becomes tough when you're dealing with the same nonsense over and over again. And I mean, I'll just say this one last thing. You know, no, I'm not going to say it. So you go ahead, Josh.
I was just gonna say, like, I mean, it's very, very difficult, even with research training.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to go into another field. So, like, I was having a conversation today about the vaccines, right? Well, I mean, I have no science background, none. Um, so, guess how much my PhD is worth? Is nothing in that discussion.
Even, and this is something Josh and I have talked about in the past before, even within the nuances
Yeah,
of our own field.
yeah,
Like, I would never promote myself
yeah,
as an expert in Greek
yeah,
or in the New Testament, even though, you know, I had to do, I mean, I think I had to do 4 years of Greek, and I've sat in graduate seminars on Paul's writings and his use of scripture in the book of Romans and on the historical Jesus and on, you know, the developmental history of the gospels and these sorts of things. But I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. And I would never promote myself as such.
and it's one of the reasons that we in these areas of the field that we in which we don't have expertise, we cite scholars, particularly
Yeah.
those that are in the consensus or the mainstream, and we cite the reasons for their positions. Um, But this is the thing, like in this conversation, I mean, I said to Megan, do you know anybody online that could just point me to just because like I can look at peer-reviewed sources, but in the same way that you can pull up peer-reviewed sources on, the historicity of the Exodus and get some bad stuff, right? I can
Yeah.
only imagine that you can do that in the sciences. And so, it's like, okay, I can go to, these different journals and pull articles off that have these keywords and so, but I mean, I am not qualified to sift through this and to determine who are the people that hold fringe positions. So it's just, you have to rely, on people that are experts in their fields of research. And yeah, I think it's problematic when you don't.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I have no idea who she is. So Oz had a follow-up question, Dr. Josh. Can you confirm that he is the Lugal?
The
everybody?
Lugal?
The Lugal?
Is he the king? Yes.
Oh,
See?
he's been doing the
Sumerian.
learning. Yeah,
He's the
been
Lugal
learning.
Gal. He's the great king.
Tangela, I know you were waiting.
Nice.
I said one question in the chat. There were actually two before you get up here. So let me ask this other one and then you can go. This is from Birdie. Why did the story of Hagar and Ishmael exist in Genesis alongside the story of Sarah and Isaac, despite it just convoluting the story of the covenant and showing Sarah and Abraham in a negative light? What is the reason the author would include this story, as many argue, that leaving the story out would remove any confusion over the true son of the covenant, Ishmael or Isaac? Why is there such a conflict between the intended message and the received one? So I guess throwing in
Maybe part of the sorry. I was gonna say maybe part of the problem here is focusing just on the covenant. Because the thing about the book of Genesis, lots of texts from the Hebrew Bible, is there are a variety of themes and messages and ideals that are promoted through all sorts of stories. And I think, this is not something I know much about, but on the basis of my reading of the text, as much as Hagar may and Ishmael may convolute the covenant ideals, it seems to me that there's another part of the story here that the author wants to tell, and that has to do with a fairly consistent focus on championing the little guy, slaves, the less fortunate. Quite often, lots of these stories in the book of Genesis are told as by people who are not. I think in their original setting, a lot of these stories were told by people who were not the power brokers in their culture and their society, even though eventually they became co-opted within power structures. Lots of them didn't originate in there. So I don't know. That's just something I think about when I when I look at those particular motifs, but I'm sure Josh has more lucid
Well,
insight about this than I
I mean,
do.
I'm not. Don't be sure about that. And I would say that the theme, certainly the theme of the primeval history, is the recurring. God sets things up correctly and screws them up. God has to come back and fix them. Then God sets them up again correctly, and man screws it up, and God has to come in and fix it. Right? I mean, it's like the recurring theme, and I think this continues on into Genesis. Right? So here with Hagar, I mean, I haven't thought about this from this particular angle, necessarily with this question in mind, but I suspect what's going on here with Hagar is that look at what the situation is. Here, Genesis 15, God's established this covenant. They've parted the animals and walked. Supposed to walk down between the pieces, and Abraham falls asleep, and God passes down through, and so this is an unconditional covenant, right? That it's being established. God is saying, "I will do this," but then the next chapter, how are we going to do that? I don't have any kids, right? So they come up with their own plan. And that plan results in turmoil in the text. And I think it's just a continuation of this theme. And of course, what follows in chapter 17, after that sort of gets smoothed out and to whatever degree, God comes back and says, yeah, remember, like, I got this, right? And here's how you're going to know. So I again, I think this is this theme of a combination of how's it going to happen, try to do it on their own, along with the recurring theme of God sets it up, promises to make it happen right, and man screws it up. God has to come in and fix things and smooth it over. And so I actually don't think that from a literary standpoint, this produces a problem. I think it's there to lead the narrative on.
Fantastic. Okay, Tangelo, you've been waiting. Go ahead and ask your question. Oh, that's so melodramatic. Your mic's not working. You might have to bounce out and come back in. We can't hear you, Otangelo. You're lighting up, but there's no sound.
That sucks.
Man.
He's been waiting very patiently.
Yes, he has. I feel bad. We'll see if he pops right back in. We do have another question in the chat. Never mind. Here he is. Oh, you're probably going to have to restart Discord. It's still doing the same thing. So let's go back to the chat. How long you guys have set aside for questions?
Dr. Kipp, I'll leave that up to you.
No, I'm good. It's Friday evening and my kids are all grown up, so I'm pretty free.
I'm good to go for a bit longer. Everybody's in bed here, so.
So the next. Oops, sorry. Am I talking?
No, I was just gonna say I was just thinking. I guess I should figure out who my kids are.
Still not working.
So this one is from the Awoken One. Dr. Josh, can Daniel 7 be argued to be a dual prophecy where Jesus is to be the Son of Man, coming with the clouds at a future coming, even though the original context of Daniel was talking about Antiochus Epiphanes in the 2nd century BCE? Daniel 12 seems to predict the Messianic age would happen at the death of Antiochus, and the resurrection of the dead in Ezekiel 37 would happen. It seems the New Testament writers tried to reinterpret Daniel and thought that the end times was in their generation, that Daniel was talking about them with Rome.
And this is, like this is we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but this is sort of the common, what do they call it? Interbiblical or intertextual exegesis, right? It's coming at the text, and I mean, you see it in Second Esdras, right? In the early first millennium CE, it's like, well, Daniel thought it was Greece, but actually he wasn't given like the full story, and here's why it was Rome. So yeah, I mean, can that argument be made? Absolutely. I mean, people make it a lot. Is it a convincing argument? I think that's probably what they're asking, and I would say no. I don't think so. But again, you've moved into the realm of theology at that point. We're trying to make these sorts of near and distant fulfillment. If there's nothing in the text of the Hebrew Bible that would provide for that reasonably, you've sort of left my field. When you start to say, well, and not obviously not a Woken one, but when a person starts to say, well, this has this future fulfillment. Is that possible? Sure. And are God's ways higher? And well, in the Christian worldview, yes. So does that allow for it? Sure. I mean, like I'm fine with all of that. I don't think it's correct, but I guess what Eddie, philosophically, it doesn't sound contradictory to me. Like not logically possible or whatever. So, but of course, it's getting outside of my field. But it's a good question, and yeah, it can be argued. Dr. Kipp, if you want to say anything about it, go for it.
No, that's fine. I did think that something I've noticed when I talk to certainly when I talk to family or to friends or people that I meet, there seems to be a common misconception. Speaking just generally here, that that theology and like biblical studies and ancient history are all like the same thing. And I'm sure it was the same case at Hopkins, but every university that I attended, and where I've worked, the theology department was always completely separate from where I was doing my work in the usually in like the biblical studies department or the ancient history department or the classics department. I think it's helpful for people to understand that.
Isn't kind of a follow up on that? Isn't part of Daniel considered to be a later edition?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, Daniel the scholarly position on Daniel is that it's a text that developed over a longer period of time. That it wasn't written in the 5th century by an actual prophet named Daniel, and that it's composed of various individual separate parts. There's the clearest division within the book of Daniel is between the first half, which not all, but most of it is written in Aramaic, and it takes the form of these court tales featuring this figure Daniel and his friends. Then the second half is written in Hebrew, and these are prophecies and oracles apocalyptic prophecies about the Antiochian crisis from the 2nd century. So, and there's very, very good reasons to think and to hold that over a period of decades or centuries. These are individual components within the book that were put together over time by editors, by scribes.
Can I answer to that? I think my mic is working now. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can finally hear you. Go ahead, Antangelo.
Okay. In regards of someone of you guys said that people should actually listen to experts. I disagree with that, because I think if you just blindly believe to what experts say, experts are also biased. Even if there is evidence which they eventually have a better education, which they study and so forth.
Do you have a question, Otangelo? This is for questions. We're not debating.
I would go to that if you let me end my point here.
Okay.
So, would you say that today, with the information that we have access to through the internet, books and science papers, any layman can basically educate himself and make own conclusions rather than just listening to what others say, so-called experts, which, okay, they can have a good education, I agree with that, but there is always a philosophical circle around the evidence, and experts, they are also biased. So wouldn't we actually, rather than simply listening blindly to what experts say, investigate by ourselves to come to sound, solid conclusions?
Yeah, Kipp, I'll keep mine short. Eddie, you'll be proud of me with this one. I think you've set up a false dichotomy. Come on, somebody.
Spot on, baby. Good job, Dr. Josh.
That's good.
Yeah. So I don't think that anyone's advocating for any type of blind, acceptance of. I'm not even sure what that would look like necessarily, because who would you blindly accept? I think this is probably more akin to, I had some chest pains a month ago. Now I could, right? I could
WebMD.
Yeah, could WebMD that up. No, but I mean, I could go and take basic courses in anatomy, and start to then get higher level books on the heart and cardiology and all these things. The reality here, though, is that there's a reason we have these fields of research, in my opinion. And I know from it's interesting because this is not generally a question. I don't know how this is going to sound. This is not generally a question that comes up post grad school, because it's very difficult. It's very difficult to realize how little you actually know. Like right now, there's Kipp, what is that thing called? The imposter syndrome. Like the academic imposter syndrome, where it's like, well, no, I was gonna say it's the like.
Sounds like Dunning-Kruger.
I was gonna say it's more like you've got your PhD, or you've even been in the field for a few years, and you're like, yeah, but I mean, like, should I really have a PhD? I mean, look at all the other people in my field that know so much more than me. Right? I think they call it the imposter. You feel like an imposter, I mean, yeah, technically you got this PhD, but I mean, and the reason for that is that there's so much out there. I mean, I worked for 4 years on old Babylonian, Sumerian, and Akkadian texts from the city of Kish. And I wrote a 600-page dissertation on this and did editions of all the texts that nobody had done. And even now, if you say, "Hey, what's that tablet mean from Kish?" I'm going to say, "Man, we should probably go talk to Ori Gabai. Let's write Paul Del Nero. Let's just find out that what I'm saying is right, because I don't want to lead you astray." And I'm like probably one of 10 people in the world that can talk about that, at that level. But even then, it's like, my God, there's just so much out there that even on that topic, I know that I don't have a full mastery of. So, yes, I agree that absolutely. I said I was going to be fast, and I'm being very slow. This would be the last thing that I say. I think it's absolutely true that there is a lot of headway, a lot of ground, particularly like fundamental level ground, that can be, gained by studying. I mean, that's why we have our channel, right? That's why we do this sort of stuff, because people are very intelligent. The problem is that when you start to go against what all of the experts in the field are saying, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily wrong. But if all the experts in the field are saying it, you really want to understand why. Dr. Kipp, what do you think?
Yeah.
Are you playing pool, Dr. Kipp?
Sorry, no, that's my. I've got I've got a 9-month-old Malinois puppy right now, and he gets bored really easy. So that's him. That's him rolling his bone across the floor. Sorry about that.
Well, I'm
Dr.
sure
Josh, can I quick answer to that, what he just said?
I think it's my turn, and I think there tends to be or there can be. Yeah, Josh, I'll just maybe say the same thing you said a different way, is there can be a failure to appreciate or to grasp the amount of legwork and the types of skills and the amount of specialization that's required to make the really, really complex things, just speaking within our discipline, simple and understandable. Simple and understandable enough to publish on the internet.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and respond to Tangelo. We got other people waiting to ask questions, though.
Real quick. Yeah, I don't know about you, the field of you guys, but I see it in regards of biology, and especially in regards of evolution. There is a consensus of over 150 years where the big majority of biologists, the scientific establishment, still even today promoting evolution. Nonetheless, there is so much evidence that the claim of evolution is simply not true. So I really much put that in doubt, that when the majority says that something is true, that we should take it as true.
Can I ask you, Tangelo, and sorry, but I mean, I guess this is the question that I would ask is, what is your training in, like, I don't even know what to add, like evolutionary biology? What's your formal training?
As I said previously, I think everyone has easy access to information through the internet. And so you don't need a PhD or a formal education in order to educate yourself in regards of basically any scientific field. I am a machine designer, and I study biology and philosophy and different faculties which have to do with God many years. And I really think that I can have access and educate myself. I don't see any disadvantage to some biologist which makes his experiments in the laboratory. Okay, he can have eventually lab experience. That doesn't mean necessarily that he knows more in regards of the relevant issues which we as atheists and theists debate about, which is in regards of origins.
Well,
So that was a big.
I was just gonna say, if the evidence is that strong, then somebody needs to do a much better job of convincing all those scholars who hold to the consensus that they're wrong.
I mean, this is where
really.
This is where it ends
Right?
up, though, right? Because you have to then say, because if I go back and say, why is it the consensus disagrees with you? Then the answer that I normally hear back is, well, they have a bias, or and I think actually Tangelo said something similar to that, right? They have a bias, or they have these, philosophical presuppositions or whatever. And the problem for me is that as a person in this field, where this charge is also leveled, against us. So, well, you guys just don't believe in the supernatural. That's why you come to these conclusions about Daniel or Isaiah. Well, I mean, walk with me, and I will introduce you to scores of Christians that are in the fields of archaeology and biblical studies that agree with me. We can, and believe me when I tell you, they are not anti-supernaturalists.
Not in the least.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, not only that, I mean, even in the field of biology, there are tons and tons of theists who work on evolutionary biology, and it's not like it's one side, one ideology, one kind of theology or something that's guiding. We're literally looking at the world and trying to put the pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, you won't last under peer review with those types of pronounced biases. You just won't.
I think it's kind of telling how like he immediately tried to interject between Kipp and you, and now he's not even an audience listening to us. I don't know.
That's why I wasn't going to keep him on stage.
Nice.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting though when he brings this up, and I think you guys could actually speak on this a little bit. If you want to hold a fringe position or whatever, I mean that's fine. You're more than welcome to do that, but at least admit that what you're holding to is fringe. And like, do you think But like when someone like SJ, for example, I'm not trying to rag on her, but I think it's a good example because Kipp actually said this in one of her streams. It's like you dump on Jesus mythicism because it's such a fringe position. You just rely on the scholarship, and then you fall to the dating of Daniel, which is just as fringe, but you act like, oh, well, on this one, they're all biased. Obviously we can't trust the scholarship here, but with Jesus mythicism, oh, definitely. Or, something like that, I think is.
Well, I think we've learned today that cognitive dissonance is a real thing.
One of my favorite ones is the rather duplicitous characterization of within our field of the scholarly consensus as some scholars. And you hear this with some frequency from some apologists who will identify the consensus position that they disagree with, then classify that as, well, this is what some scholars believe. No, that's not. Yeah. This is what the majority of scholars are telling us. So, and I know it like when we continue to pound on the value of the consensus, it can sound like an appeal to authority. And I guess my interjection to that is, and this is something that I think both Josh and I have been saying pretty consistently evening a few times, that these are, it's a consensus position for a reason. And before you go about attempting to deconstruct it, you damn well better be sure you clearly understand the reasons why the very best trained people on the planet in this particular field hold the view that they do.
Did you have another question, Ethan?
Yeah, actually, I have like kind of a specific one, maybe, and maybe you guys don't know an answer. That's fine, but maybe it would be interesting. But I'm trying to make a video on the documentary hypothesis for my channel, and I want to show an example. I'm looking for like the best resource to look at to show how the flood story is multiple stories or whatever. Like I know there's plenty of like stuff I can look up, but just someone who like really breaks down the text. I'm wondering if you know of like a specific book or paper or scholar or something that would be best to look into, like what actually belongs to each source.
Like a breakdown
Yeah,
of
just like
the
which
actual text itself.
Yeah.
John Collins, and this would be
His
an easy one to
introduction.
use.
Yeah.
He's got a 2018 introduction to the Hebrew Bible. And in it's maybe the first or second chapter, he actually breaks it apart in full.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
shows which go.
It's in
where.
chapter 2.
Okay. I don't know if Joel does it in his book.
I don't
Joel
think
Baden.
he does.
No, he doesn't. That's why that's where I looked first, but and that's kind of why I'm asking. Yeah.
You may want to check is like Richard Elliott Friedman published a very useful book called The Bible with Sources Revealed, where he basically produces his own color-coded deconstruction of the of now I think is it just the it would just be the Torah then. Yeah. So he produces his own version essentially of what texts are in what sources, and he's got useful handy notes to go along with it too. It's a very, very nice breakdown.
Yeah, that book looks really good, and it's only like $16 paperback or whatever.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Did you have a question, Ellen?
Yeah, it was sort of inspired by Otangelo, which is to both Dr. Josh and Kipp. How do you maintain your calm, especially Dr. Josh
yes, especially Dr. Josh
is notorious. He's notorious for maintaining his calm demeanor, right? I try. I do. I try. And then I don't. That doesn't work. And I'm putting this somewhat humorously, but it is kind of a serious question. I maintain up to a point, and then I don't. Then I just don't. Do you understand? Did I make sense? Did I even make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally.
I would second that question.
I mean, I think a lot of it is at my core, I don't like confrontation, which is weird given what I do online. But it's the reason that I tend to, well, as you can see here, like Dr. Kipp and I are together doing this, right? We can sort of we can sort of play off each other, and if need be, like Kipp can be the bad cop. Sorry, that's terrible. But I mean, like
No.
I don't like confrontation in general. And so I guess I try to avoid it.
And then he just goads me into
Yeah.
doing it.
Listen, you come on and you get upset with them.
This is actually not that far of actual conversations.
It's so true. Because see, this is what tends to happen is if I'm one-on-one, well, I mean, anybody that's heard the conversation that I had with that gentleman who I'm sure everybody knows I'm referring to. Yes.
Well, there's a follow-up question, which is, if not, then are you even human? Are you a bot?
Well, I think I tend to have like that element of people pleaser infused, and I feel like I keep it in check, but it still shines through, at least in my demeanor. And so I tend to, if you watch me interact with people that I vehemently disagree with, I did a debate with Dr. Michael Brown. Dr. Michael Brown and I are good friends. Like we texted a couple weeks ago. But we disagree on so many things. But we did that debate on slavery. And it's funny because like the conversation never veered away from things that we could agree on. And it's like I seek those things. You know what? Let's talk about this passage because I suspect we agree on this. You know, and people are like in the side chat, talk about verses 44 to 46. Like, yeah, but we should really hone in on the earlier part of Leviticus 25. This is really a good, a build up to it. Oh, we're out of time. Damn it. But yeah, so that tends to happen.
So on that note, I've listened to a little bit of Dr. Brown's stuff. Is he somebody you would recommend? And I mean, at least his Hebrew knowledge or Jewish knowledge.
Oh, his Hebrew's good.
Yeah, Dr. Brown's well trained.
Yeah.
Okay.
He clearly has theological commitments. Sorry, Dr. Kipp, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say the same thing. So, and I think that it's worth noting too. It depends on what he's speaking about too, in certain instances.
And that's true of many evangelical scholars. Well, yeah, certainly all of us. But I think of somebody like James Hoffmeyer, well-trained Egyptologist. Kenneth Kitchen, also phenomenal Egyptologist.
Yeah.
But when that that dial turns to the Exodus, it's like
oh yeah, that's walking on shard glass.
Yeah, you gotta kind of pay some more attention. And again, it's not that they make like dumb arguments or something. Please don't hear me, suggesting that they're very, very intelligent
it's the
scholars.
same old apologetics.
Yeah, I mean, an example of this might be, when both of them, Hoffmeyer and Kitchen, talk about Exodus 12. I think it's in verse 37 where it says, 600,000 men on foot, along with a mixed multitude, left Egypt. Well, that figure, 600,000 fighting men, that's going to estimate, it's going to move up to like 2.5 million, 3 million people, even at a conservative estimate for how many people left Egypt, including women and children. So, everybody agrees, including them, that 3 million people, 3 million Israelites could not have walked out of New Kingdom Egypt. There were only that many people in New Kingdom Egypt, all of Egypt. So then, and they say that, we know archaeologically and historically this could not, this many people could not have left. So then what do we do with this 600,000 number? Well, instead of saying that it's wrong, right, and looking for a sort of paradigm or a model to make that new data point fit into correctly, it's, well, maybe we've misunderstood the Hebrew term elef. Maybe elef doesn't mean thousand. It means it everywhere else, but maybe it doesn't mean it here. I mean, that's a little bit of a hyperbolic statement, but there are places where it has a nuanced meaning. But in this context, in this syntactical structure, it means thousand, right? But they make an elaborate argument, that it doesn't. But the problem is that it creates huge, what I consider to be insurmountable problems for other passages. And so, yeah, it's just, as Dr. Kipp said much more eloquently and concisely, you just got to be careful what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's ad hoc to the rescue.
Mhm.
So on
Yes.
that note, the reason that I had listened to some of his stuff, and yeah, I really keep in mind the apologetic that he's, putting forth.
And he would say
I've
the
been,
same about us, just to be clear. And I would not take any offense to that. He would
yeah,
say,
that's,
good scholars got to be careful what they're talking about because they have an anti-supernatural bias or something.
yeah,
I get it.
yeah,
Get it.
but so here's the issue and why I kind of stumbled on some of his stuff is the last few months I've been doing a lot more study on Judaism and Jewish thought, theology, the metaphysics, trying to get a better understanding of the New Testament setting. And without it, mostly it seems like I find Messianic Jews who all have apologetics built into their teaching. Is there anybody that you guys could recommend that gives a fair and honest Jewish assessment of
the New Testament?
Yeah. The kind of the Jewish backbone to the ideas and thoughts and
Well, I think John Collins has written some really good stuff that you might find helpful. There's I'm pretty sure he's dead now, but a New Testament scholar by the name of Geza Vermeesh, who worked also in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I believe he had converted. I believe he converted to Christianity from Judaism at one point, but he's written some very good stuff about Jewish background to the New Testament. And yeah, honestly, just think some of these guys too, when you pick them up, just make sure you check out their bibliographies, like their own bibliographies as well.
Mhm.
Is a nice way to find other sources. I'll name a couple of others here. James Sanders did some nice work back in the 90s, I think. And what's his name? He's a student of Bart Ehrman. Do you know who I'm talking about, Josh? He wrote about the sons of Israel in the New Testament. Really, really interesting stuff.
What about Lightfoot?
Not Jason Staples, but sorry. Right.
What about Lightfoot?
Yeah, he's pretty good. Maybe a bit dated by now, but
Yeah. And Gill,
yeah, no,
I think they're like 16, 17 century something Gill. I can't remember.
That's a lot dated.
So what you're saying is there's better works now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. As a rule, you shouldn't be doing your you shouldn't be doing much of anything but history or scholarship using 16th century, 17th
I
century
didn't.
sources.
Yeah, it was. They were recommended as
Sure.
as decent reads on it.
Sure.
I appreciate that.
I
Nice.
found a
Thank you.
copy of that Bible with references or whatever
Sources
online.
revealed.
What was
Yeah,
that
yeah.
question?
And it's really good. So thank you. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You got a question, God?
Yeah, I can use one. Maybe it's a weird one. How come it seems like a lot of sectors of Christianity seem to ignore the Old Testament completely, or nearly completely?
They don't
And
want
only
to deal
stick
with
with the New Testament.
I think because it's big and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I do think I do think a lot of Christian denominations have developed, maybe not, in their doctrinal statements, but maybe in practice. And Eddie, like you could probably speak to this at this stage more than I could. But they've really embraced a type of reader response theory.
Mhm.
So, the whole sort of stereotypical sitting around the Sunday school class being led by whose turn it is for the week in the class, and they have like their materials they've read through and they say, okay, so, question number one, how does, Ezekiel's response here to the people, make you think about your life in the 21st century or something, and then everybody kind of gives their feeling about it. And I actually think it's going to sound crazy that you're saying this, but I think that's actually a productive way, can be a productive way to utilize ancient texts. As long as you're not turning around and saying, okay, you feel that way now, let's use that as authoritative and go make laws based on it, right? But I think that allows you to read passages like, 1 Samuel 15 and say, what is it that Saul did? Well, Saul didn't really, he didn't trust God, right? And in what ways
Yeah.
have I like almost done what I was supposed to do and then blamed it on other people? When do I do that in my life? You know what? I need
Yeah.
to rethink this. Like, I think that's actually very useful. Nobody's getting down into, wait a minute, he killed infants, right?
Yeah.
Like it's genocide. Yeah. But that's but that's not the point, right? And in that type of reader response theory, that's not the point. And I actually think that's it's a direction that I do wish Christianity would go in a bit more, particularly in like fundamentalist circles. But of course, that sort of thing is anathema in fundamentalist circles. But
Yep.
anyway,
Do you have something, Dr. Kipp?
In terms of why, well, I mean, I tend to think that, I mean, so much of this stems. I mean, we have inherited just in general here in the modern West. We've inherited, I think, just a such a strong misunderstanding of what these texts were in the first place and how they came to develop. But then also inherited a particular method for how to read them and what to do with them. And something that you see uh within Second Temple Judaism, within early Christianity, is this very, um I would say it's a very utilitarian approach to the text where it basically becomes entirely about what it can mean for me today and how I can make it fit my life. I mean, this is where we talked a little bit about the phenomenon of prophecy earlier, and this is very much where this came from, is this um this conviction early on that these texts were special, therefore they must mean something to me now today. I mean, this is what every Jew in the first century was doing, who actually, read the texts. They're looking through them, they're poring over them, looking for coded messages essentially about their own personal circumstances in their own time. When it comes to the Bible, I mean, let's be honest, there's parts of it that lend itself much more easily to our contemporary circumstances, which is why, the Gideons produced a New Testament with the Psalms. It's or you'll have lots of churches will venture no farther than reading Genesis, Psalms, and Proverbs, and then the New Testament. So yeah, as much as everybody in fundamentalist or in evangelical circles hold to an idea of the entire Bible being the inerrant Word of God and the complete canon, there is very much at work in almost every church of a really, really selective canon. And it might be a little bit different from one church to the next, but I think by and large you'll find that everyone's got their favorite text, and I think it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, I am an atheist, is what I actually am, and I find it very interesting, the entire Bible.
Not, I want to take
The
a step
entire
back.
Bible as a phenomenon.
No, like it's very interesting how the Bible is set up. Like it seems to lead you to want to lead you into the religion, the way it's built.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, that on a particular reading, right? I'm not sure if yeah, I don't know. You were gonna say something, Josh?
Yeah, I was going to say I probably got about 10, 15 more minutes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'll hold my comments. We got two people wanting to ask questions. Harlequin, go ahead. Oh no, Harlequin, you waited all this time and your mic's not working.
No.
Man.
I think it's me. Jinxing everybody.
That's Harlequin, you're probably gonna have to go out and come back in. Your mic's not working, you're lighting up, but we can't hear anything. Awoken one, you go ahead.
Yes, I guess I was going to ask either Dr. Josh or Dr. Kipp. I just don't know how much y'all know about messianic prophecy, but I was going to ask, for me, I care about getting an answer to Christianity, and I think what no one does is study where the passages where the Messiah is actually mentioned. I don't know if any of y'all have specifically where he's mentioned and what exactly he's supposed to do.
There's a fantastic book, and Kip, this is I think much more in line with obviously it is because it's Colin's book on the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Messiah and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Have you read that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No.
The Scepter and the Star.
Yeah, the Scepter and the Star.
Very, very good.
I don't know if it. Yeah, that's probably well, Kip. I think you know more about this than I do, but that's where I
No,
would
but yeah,
probably
that's where
start.
I'd go to. John J. Collins.
Yeah.
The book is called The Scepter and the Star. I think it's actually part of the Anchor resource series, Anchor Sources. I don't know, something like that.
And it's
But,
recent. What is it? A 2018?
Well, it's a second edition now, eh? He
Ah,
originally
yeah.
published that back in. I mean, I think I was actually still an undergraduate when he came to our university the first time, and that book had just been published. So that was like 95. It's there's a new edition, and it's updated and expanded, and it's very good.
The reason that I point that out is not it's more from a bibliographic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is one of like the tricks of the trade, right? If you get a good scholar that puts out a new publication, I don't want to say it doesn't matter what his conclusion is. It's such a great resource because if he's good, he's going to cite any of the recent work that's been done on the topics. You can just flip through the bibliography and go through his footnotes and be like, oh my gosh, look, this your book I didn't know about, or this article that was written by this amazing scholar but is buried in a feshrift somewhere, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, that deals more with the messianic prophecies themselves. I guess what I'm getting at. Like
a list of which are messianic prophecies. Is that sort of what you're looking for?
No, I'm looking exactly like I want to know exactly who the Messiah is, what's the description, what is supposed to happen, what's not supposed to happen to him.
Right.
What exactly? I mean, I think I found every passage he's mentioned, and he ain't mentioned a lot.
Yeah.
But I think no one talks about the subject. Like I don't hear it in atheist discussions. I don't hear it even in the Jewish community. I don't hear anyone talking about where the Messiah is, what he's supposed to do, what's supposed to happen when he's here. I don't ever hear that talked about. But I think, and the truth is, he's not that important. But knowing about him is probably the most important thing to study. You know what I mean? I've heard of John Collins. I've even looked at his books with Daniel, his early critiques of it. Jim Majors gave me a recommendation. I definitely want to buy some of his books. But I mean, for me, it's all about the messianic prophecies and Daniel and how that carries over into Christianity and did Jesus fulfill the prophecy?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference between what these passages in the Hebrew Bible, what they actually intended. I use that word carefully, and how New Testament authors interpreted them. And so it sounds like what you're saying is, what was it that the Messiah was supposed to do? Let's say he did show up in the first century, right?
Yes.
What is it that the Hebrew Bible says he's supposed to have done?
It says he's supposed to unify Israel and Judah. He's supposed to rule the unified kingdom and then speak peace to the nations and counsel them.
Right. So sorry, it was that's the question that you're asking. You want is that what you're saying? Like, what is it that scholars agree that coming into the first century, everybody would have been expecting the Messiah to do X, Y, and Z? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, well,
That's
that could be part of it, but I mean, I'm guessing
and that's a more difficult question because what we see, and I think it's important too to consider the cultural background against which Christianity developed. In first century Judaism, there wasn't just one unified expectation of who the Messiah was and what he was going to do. Within the Dead Sea Scrolls,
I need to interject though. I mean, that's not important to me. What's important to me is what the text it's what the texts say was supposed to happen. You know what I mean?
But of course, yes, but I mean, part of the problem here is deciding which texts
That's right.
are you're going to identify as messianic.
Well,
Because
I'm
that
thinking. Well, I'm definitely focused on Zechariah 9:9. That's the
Well,
donkey entrance, and that's really the only prophecy that he completed. But if you read Zechariah 9:10, God was supposed to cut off the instruments of war from Israel and Judah, and that didn't happen. But
what Dr.
between
Kipp's
Zechariah,
trying to
yes,
say, what is it depends on which Jewish tradition you go to, because not all of them are messianic.
And are
okay,
you
I got
taking the text from Qumran?
like I
Yeah.
was going to So, and I mean, like Zechariah 9:9 as an example is I mean that's a and this is where part of the problem is too, right? Like the word itself, Mashiach, which on its
anointed.
own simply means anointed one,
Yep.
and is applied, I would argue, universally within the Old Testament to kings or to prophets, or sorry, kings or priests.
Yes.
Now, one of the problems that you encounter here is you start what invariably happened was uh, the Jewish collectors and compilers of scriptures, the ones who were reading the texts, started to add more and more layers onto this. So you start to there's the development of, I guess, what you would call messianic prophecies from texts where there there is not even a Mashiach identified. So, and this is where within the milieu, this is why you had a variety of understandings of who the Messiah was and what he was going to do, and I mean, yeah, it's it's complicated.
I mean, but see, like for me though, I mean, I think for me, this is the way I just look at it though. Like I care, I care about what's the Tanakh, what it says, and it, there should not be any contradiction between the New Testament and the Old Testament. I mean, if it's written down, the New Testament writers are reading this scripture, and you got to have some authoritative document that says, this is divinely inspired. This has to be divinely inspired for Jesus to fulfill prophecy and be the king. I don't know. It's complicated. I mean, but that's just the way I look at it. The way I just look at it is Jesus in the Old Testament? I mean, I don't know if that's the best way to address Christianity, but I mean, that's probably the only way I can address it.
I can recommend a source for you.
What?
Rabbi Friedman. He's all over YouTube. He's a Hasidic Jew. They are considered mystical because they're like a watered down version of Kabbalism, and they are messianic. And he will show on his videos who the Messiah is supposed to be, the verses that are supposed to tell about the coming Messiah. But there's a lot of Jewish sects that deny there's even any messianic prophecies and don't hold to. That's what Dr. Kipp was getting at, was like with the
Let's say, like, but is it like, or are you saying like within the Jewish community, it's kind of like also oral tradition too? I mean, I don't know.
yeah, so most of them hold to an oral Torah, and I think the earliest written down oral Torah was like around 1000 AD or something like that. So it literally is an oral tradition. They claim goes all the way back, unbroken chain, to the written Torah. but you're not going to get it, depending on the Jewish sect, you're not going to get agreement on whether there even is a Messiah and who the Messiah is, or what passages are messianic or not.
I got you.
That's what I'm
gonna-
saying. If you want, oh, sorry, go Dr. Kipp.
No, I was just gonna. I was gonna say one more thing, and then I think we'll move on to a final question. But what we have, what survives today as our sects of Judaism, people should understand too that this is not necessarily, or this isn't a clear representation of the picture of Judaism even at the time of Jesus. So, after the destruction of the temple, rabbinic Judaism, which was based on an expression of Pharisaism, is what came out of that. But we have entire Jewish sects, numerous of them that have disappeared entirely. So it becomes challenging when we want to talk about any kind of Jewish consensus, particularly before the destruction of the temple.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate it, guys.
All right, last question. Harlequin, if your mic's working, if you didn't leave and come back, it probably isn't. And it's not working.
That's too
Well,
bad.
that's a sad shame.
Do what?
That's a shame.
Yeah.
It is.
Sorry, Harlequin.
Looks like he
I sent him
jumped
a
out.
message, but he didn't respond. I don't know if he got my message that his mic wasn't working and to come back in. So.
Well, I did want to say I appreciate you, Dr. Josh and Dr. Kipp Davis, for hosting this event and allowing us, to host this event with you guys. Again, I apologize about some of the technical difficulties at the beginning, but I hope you guys, are happy with some of the questions you gotten. I hope some of the people are happy with some of the answers they gotten.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So this was fun. Yeah.
That was fantastic. Thank you guys so much for all that.
Yeah, we should definitely do this again sometimes if you guys are down.
Sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
You two should join the chats once in a while and hang out with us all. We won't bite. We don't bite.
I come in and listen from time to time. I just usually have an infant in my arms, so I can't actually join and talk.
You shouldn't talk about Oz like that, Dr. Josh.
Oh, me and you. Hey, Digi, me and you have had lots of conversations.
It's true.
This is my first time meeting you, Dr. Kipp, and
Yeah.
I found your website and some of your papers. I'm gonna check all that out, man.
Oh.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope you find it useful.
Well, I try to be as
That was fun.
objective as possible in my pursuit. So
He likes to
Good.
talk about this place called Qumran a lot, but he doesn't really have a lot of experience in it.
that's the caves, isn't it?
That's yes.
Maybe someday me and him can sit down and just have a conversation about that.
Oh, Qumran.
Here is
Harlequin's back, yeah.
Oh,
maybe it'll work.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this will be the last question. You did send it to me. If you guys can, if you want to hit it briefly, it's not one that can be brief, but you're gonna have to make it brief. You wanted to ask Dr. Josh what you thought about the 600 plus laws, which that specifically Gentiles were meant to still follow. I think if there were any whether Gentiles were supposed to follow them.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. It depends, I guess, on which way we're looking at it. So if you're if you're looking at it strictly from the narrative, different nations had different laws, right? Once an individual came under sort of the jurisdiction or whatever of the nation of Israel, well then, they're subjected to the laws of the nation of Israel, just, like any other nation. So there's certainly rules. And again, like probably the person to read on this more would be, Tikva Frymer-Kinski has a great section in the Laws of the Ancient Near East 2-volume set, edited by Raymond Westbrook. Of course, Ray Westbrook has an edited volume put together by Bruce Wells and Munch, I think. I can't remember. It's called From the Tigris to the Tiber. But yeah, I mean, they write, of course, Bruce Wells writes extensively on this as well. But the role, like the laws for Gentiles in the narrative, I mean, if you think about places like Deuteronomy 20, there's a very specific role for any foreigners that are living in the land, right? They're dead. Yes. So, those that are outside of the land of Canaan proper, they can either be subjected to, provide tribute, but again, they're not becoming residents of Israel. So then you go to passages like Leviticus 25, and you can see, or just in the book of Leviticus itself. But again, this is all dealing with sort of a coherent narrative, coming at it from this more fundamentalist approach. If we're doing it from, an actual historical critical view, well, now it gets vastly more complicated, because are these laws even laws that were current in Israel? Do they represent, the musings or the desires of Judean scribes? Like, are they more proverbial? Like, what? There are lots of different opinions on this, and so then it, kind of goes back to, what do we actually know about laws in the land in the ancient Near East? How would they pull together, at least from a informative standpoint, to tell us what it is that we would say is probably going on in Iron Age Israel? Tough. So I guess the answer. That probably wasn't satisfying at all.
It most definitely
I thought it was
satisfied
very
me.
satisfying. Yeah.
You always satisfy me.
Oh, come on, somebody.
I guess that's it. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
seriously. Thank y'all again.
Anytime.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
You too, y'all. Come back and see us sometime.
We'll
Party
do
on,
that.
dudes.
All right.
Thank
Good.
Yeah.
Hi, TJump.
Hey, how's it going? So, final announcements. I always like to say, if you like the server, join, subscribe. Feel free to donate to my Patreon, become a mod. You can host events like this whenever you want. Discord.io/TJump is the link. Again, join the Patreon $5 level. You become a mod, and you can host events and do this kind of cool stuff like Ilmatic and Eddie did. Thank you, Ilmatic and Eddie, for hosting events, and keep up the good work. See you guys later.
No problem, man.
Yeah,
Hope you have a good night.
Hope I didn't screw it up too bad.
Oh, you fucked it up. No, I'm kidding. You didn't screw it up as bad as me. You didn't screw it up as bad as me. I'm just sitting there and like, jeez. Long story.
Y'all have a good one. I'm about to pee on myself.
All right. I'm going to change the